Hello and welcome to SHOWstudio's live panel discussions. In these discussions, experts from all parts of the industry discuss and debate the most important Fashion Week shows of the season. Today, at the end of Pitti Uomo, we're going to be discussing Telfar Autumn-Winter 20. I'm your panel chair today. I'm Bella Gladman, current editorial associate at SHOWstudio, and I'd love my panellists to introduce themselves. Do you want to start, Lewis?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Burton. I'm a performance artist, DJ, and activist, and I run a club night and performance art platform called Inferno.
Hi, I'm Begum Berdan. I am a designer of a unisex brand called Begum Berdan.
Hi, I'm Zeinab Batchelor. I'm a photographer and creative director from London.
Hi, I'm Dogukan Nesanir. I'm a stylist and creative consultant.
Cool, thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so I guess first impressions, what did you think of the collection? Was it a good season from Telfar?
Yeah?
Yeah, I thought it was a really strong collection. I really like the referencing of like the first thing that reminds me of this really like masculine versus feminine energy constantly clashing. It was really beautiful. Like you've got the hard leathers with the soft silks. And then it kind of like teeters off in this kind of like dandy early 1800s kind of feel to the collection, which I think echoes where the show took place.
Yeah, absolutely, because obviously they were showing in Pitti, which is as a guest chair, which I think is exciting because they are a New York brand. What were you going to say, Doggy?
No, the first thing that pops in my head is when I see this is directly, I think it's so strong, and I think the strongest they've ever been, because this whole Renaissance feeling compared with the street vibe, and I think in general just the whole vibe, even not being there, I could totally feel the vibe, how the impact was made, also doing it at Pitti in Florence. I don't know, it just feels very, very, very strong just from the visual perspective, and I think this is kind of what every designer or brand wants to have and do, is having an impact for people who actually, we were not there, but we can totally feel it.
Yeah.
So it was very, very, very strong.
I heartily agree. I think, you know, if you're going to be showing on the, you know, on the main schedules these days, whatever fashion week you're in, you really want to be one of the ones that stands out. There are so many shows. Begum, what did you think?
I think it was not a shout, but a scream, and I felt the drama. I felt like the performance, like they were in this tables, you know, they were walking on the tables, and it was very obvious, and it was like, hey, like look at me, and the drama and the historical side as well. It looked like these like 18th century breeches with the durags. It sort of felt like working class coming together in like high fashion, and like it was just really good.
Okay, so a strong showing. Now, what was your first impression of it?
I think the good thing about Telfar is you can always kind of expect like a sense of theatrics, and there's always going to be a sense of performance. Them kind of walking on the tables is insane. Like it's kind of like a bold statement. Like you were saying, there are kind of different kind of nods to different eras. There's like the black culture with like do-rags, but then kind of like these two stripy looks at the end are kind of like reminiscent of like Elizabethan with kind of like menswear. So that's something that's super interesting, but I don't know if I'm too keen on trying to mix kind of like sportswear. So I think there was like I think if you scroll down a little bit, there's like the mix of like a puffer jacket with like a bit of leather. I think you can try and be a little bit different and you can deconstruct things, but I think realistically how wearable is that, you know, because it's ready to wear. Like, would I necessarily wear that? Maybe not, but
yes, absolutely. And I think you know, what's really interesting with Telfar is that actually there's such a disparate selection of fabrics, of kind of influences coming in, and there are certainly things in here that I feel are super wearable, and there's obviously like the puffer ones. There's like the puffers on the kind of like lower half of the knee. They're a bit far out for me. I'm not sure, maybe that works in an editorial setting, perhaps not, you know, on a runway, or perhaps not in an everyday life. But I think there's something very interesting, like you mentioned, Lewis, about this kind of like sort of historical and aristocratic kind of aspect to it. obviously showing in this sort of palazzo in Florence, and sort of hyping it up with those kind of the breeches, the white stockings. It's really bringing that kind of Baroque element into menswear. And I kind of wanted to ask you guys about the influence of sort of more kind of feminine or lush kind of design tropes into menswear when we've been coming out of a time of real like streetwear and kind of like harshness and dystopia. This seems very sort of, you know, flamboyant and extravagant, which seems quite different. What do you guys think?
I think personally, when you look at the total picture of the brand, it is less trying to be, there's so many brands right now, they're just trying to be that, but for sales. And I think genuinely you can see this is just a way of living for them. And also just from my perspective, I think actually that look that really, really, really was like stuck in my head, the tailoring pants with the overlapped yellow shirt. I think that is so, from my, maybe this is my perspective for menswear, but I think a straight man going to the bank, who maybe is in our generation in 15 years would work at, I don't know, at a bank, would wear that. And I think it's just future forward because it's, at one point I think there is this thing where we really have to understand it is kind of less, oh, I'm trying to sell this because there is gender fluid people. No, it is actually really about the fact that people change and there is a whole movement that actually allows the people show themselves rather than I'm trying to force someone into wearing a straight person wearing a dress. I think it's really less that, and this is really I think the collection and also Clemens and Telfar, they're just really celebrating that. So I was so happy to see that with all the mix and match, and I think also Ivana, the stylist, they just really, really, really celebrated this way of living rather than trying to be, oh, we're putting the straight mind into a queer mind. I think it's just really the opposite. It's actually just showing, okay, we really don't need this whole mainstream behind, oh, I'm trying to sell this afterwards to, as I said, someone working in a bank who has 3 kids and a wife. I mean, maybe, we don't know, but I think this is just why I was just really stunned by the collection.
I think there's something really interesting in there about the kind of the way that Telfar allows people to play with who they're going to become and who they can be in a way that isn't, like you said, like putting on a costume and sort of like, oh, I'm going to be, you know, this person today, but I'll go back to my normal self tomorrow. It's more that you can bring in little elements of a little silk cravat tie here, a little breech tie there, and it is actually those small details that allows like gender boundaries to be pushed. I know, Begum, like your design works a lot with breaking down these gender barriers. How do you feel it worked for this collection?
Yeah, I definitely agree with like, you know, in like historical element-wise, these things, these breeches and the high neck collars and everything, they were worn by heterosexual men. So like it's actually taking the same thing and then putting it back onto us. So in a way, it's like, it's genderless in a way that like, it's not feminine. It's like, it's not like you said, it's not like a, oh, let's put a dress on a man and like, yes, queer fashion. Like, no, it's like actually taking those elements back into our lives and making it genderless. Yeah,
I like that a lot. You also mentioned earlier about the stage set, which I think was really interesting, and basically we had like a circle of tables, and as you said, the models sort of like stomped around as people were sitting. They'd had a party the night before, and so all the sort of food and the dishes were like left out on the table, so they'd kind of started to sort of like go moldy a little bit, kind of go brown. There were stains on the tablecloth, things like that, which obviously is kind of a bit gross, but kind of amazing to have that in a fashion setting. And you know, as the models were walking around, there were musical performances, people were dancing on tables, really sort of raising the rafters of this beautiful palazzo. And I kind of wanted to talk, especially and hear from you, Lewis, as a performance artist, sort of how performance can be brought into fashion to kind of bring it to life and why that's so important.
I mean, Telfar as a brand is like, they see themselves as an artist anyways, you know, they've always considered themselves as an artist and a fashion designer. I think, you know, he constantly referenced that through his work, you know, before he was working with artists like Ryan Trecarton, where he used a print on his t-shirts a couple of seasons ago. And like, for example, I think Boy Child was performing at the event as well, but they were also walking the show, as well as Busan, and then Miss Carrie Stacks. So I think there's always been a great history of like performance in fashion, especially when it comes to queer designers. For example, McQueen, you know, it's always been these fabulous shows. And I feel like as soon as Telfar's had that like almost stamp of approval and got that big money from the CFD thing in the Vogue, that like they've like, right, the game's changed, we've played the game, we've played the fashion game, now it's we've created this thing and now we have free reign to do whatever we want. And it's been really authentic the whole way through. It's been like, this is my community, these are my friends, these are my peers, these are people who want to be involved in our community. It's very queer in its essence. You know, I think a lot of queer people have it like a chosen family per se, where you know, they might not get on with their blood relatives, wherever, and we get to pick our family, and it's an extension of that. And it's just so authentic and really celebratory, and it's like, you know, Telfar's on a platform now on a pedestal, and he's rising and bringing up the whole community with him and giving them, sharing the spotlight and platforming them. And it's a really beautiful thing to see.
It's absolutely, and I love the idea that actually community is a way for everyone to get stronger. I think there's a lot of, especially in the tough economic times we're in, there's a lot of thoughts about kind of individuality and like personal hustle, and actually it's about working with others and, you know, thinking of a collective good, you know, for, you know, future policy decisions and in fashion. Talking Berdan, we were talking earlier about community and how important it is, and I know you definitely felt like Telfar had got a really authentic sense of that. Tell us a bit more about how you feel that community works for Telfar.
I think it is when you think about certain communities that also exist for, I would say, off-fashion scenes, it really makes sense for them to actually be, as you said before, it's really authentic, and I'm believing it, because when I see also like off camera, when I'm like at a party or like in a whatever show, like last season in Paris, you could really sense the community vibe. It was insane. Like, it was absolutely amazing, because you could feel like everyone was just, at one point at the finale, for example, there was really a moment where you could feel, okay, this is really one bond. It was just like the finale, the models were dancing and like half of the crowd jumped into it. So you could feel, you know, like, I don't know, I'm just pointing out, but at a Dior show, imagine the models dancing and half of LVMH jumping into it and dancing in suits, for example. You would never see that. And I think the stiffness that doesn't exist in their community really makes them, I would say, in a way special. That, I mean, there's so many communities, and I mean, at the end of the day, it's all one, I would say, but they really created their own in and off community. And I think with like the Bushwick Birkin with their bag, you know, like this is, for me also, it's always stunning to see when they post on Instagram, always how many people actually wearing it. And I have to say, it was so smart to make it out of like fake leather, and also it's very affordable, because it's, I think, exactly, we see it's like, I don't know, at the end of the day, it's just really, really, really about the community. They want genuinely people to wear this bag. And I mean, obviously also the collection, but it's especially this bag that is kind of like, you know, everyone kind of wants at one point like a designer bag, for example. And I think it's nice for a lot of people who actually don't want to wear leather, that this bag is not made out of leather and it is affordable. So the community comes back together with just only a bag, I would say, when it comes to the whole vibe of going out of their own community to, I mean, there's obviously people that they don't even know that are wearing the bag, and I think that's what I mean with the off community be getting bigger and bigger, just because they're combining so many things that are affordable and accessible for a lot of people who actually could, not afford high-end fashion, and I think this really speaks for their brand and also how they want to show high-end fashion these days. I mean, it's 2020, and this, I think, is by far one of the best men's shows I've seen in a long time. And also coming from the last season to this, it was such a big step, just because this is really, again, their ID, and I think really brave also, as we said earlier, that some things mix and match and maybe would not wear it, but I'm always thinking there is this customer where you really think, who is wearing that? And I think they're really hitting the nail, because there is this little crowd, I would say, that really celebrates exactly like pants with the puffer on the bottom and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, I think it's really about how you create the image, and that's why I'm again just really stunned how genuine. It's very like I'm believing it. It's not like for sale.
Yeah, I like that. And as, you know, as something that you kind of mentioned, you brought up the idea of the, you know, their Telfar shopping bag, which they've remade this season in a sort of beautiful silver satin, which I instantly want. That's one of my...
Me too, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, that's all. It's great. And I'm going to put my hand up and say I already have a Telfar bag. Anyway, I am that person they don't know who's bringing it to London. But it's the... like, I think it's really great to see in this collection, there's definitely a sort of... There's something historical, there's something very contemporary, but there's also something very future about it. They've really brought back some of their sort of like Telfar kind of classics. So we're talking like the shopping bag, we're talking maybe the sort of sportswear varsity jersey t-shirts with their logo across. What did you guys think about how they done reworked the logos? Instead of saying Telfar, it says Fartel, and so it's kind of like quite lols to have fart on a expensive sweater, but we've got knitwear, which again has been a big Telfar thing. How do you guys see position this collection in Telfar so far, and where do you think they're going to go next? Zeinab?
I think this collection there are aspects of it where it relates to previous collections. So like their fall 2019, I believe, was very kind of like cowboy and 70s inspired. So they're still kind of keeping that kind of level of consistency where they're having like the cowboy boot or like a high-waisted belted trouser. This collection, in the same way that it has a story like the other ones do, I think they're going to continue to push this kind of like futuristic feel and continue to deconstruct the typical kind of like, say, varsity jacket, how they've turned that into now knitwear, as opposed to it being with like just a kind of a standard like polyester. I like some of the pieces, but I think there can be an element of futuristic and trying new things, but then whether it works, I'm not too sure. But then maybe it doesn't work for me, but then in a way that does tie into their whole motto that it's not for me, it's for everyone. So this might not apply to me, but it could work for you or it could work for someone else. I think also what I'm hoping for this collection is there's going to be another staple piece like the Birkin bag that kind of drives forward for Telfar, and it's the staple that everyone goes to. Whether there's that kind of new piece within this collection, I'm not too sure, but I do love the track pants, which they just look so comfortable, because I think that's one of the main things for me when I look at things, whether it's comfortable.
I've sort of got my eye on there's like cowboy boots, and they've incorporated their circle logo in the top, which I'm thinking, again, is a very Telfar thing to have a boot, whether it's knee-high or thigh-high. And I just think maybe that's going to be the new it shoe. Instead of the Balenciaga Triple S, everyone's going to get the Telfar boot. Lewis, what do you think?
I think it's really exciting. I feel like we're on a really fun journey with Telfar right now, and I feel like we're on an incline up, and I feel like things can get more theatrical and bigger and bolder and better. And I think it's mixing more of the history of fashion with this futuristic thing, with quintessential like working class like black Americana feel. Like there's so much things going on, but I just feel like I'm just excited to see where it goes.
Begum, in terms of like what this says about what menswear is at the moment, what do you think? Do you think Telfar is representative, or do you think they're actually leading the charge?
They're definitely leading. I've been following them for a long time now, and I think in a way, like it's definitely, for me, it's quite menswear, but like really going into that genderless vibe. And like there's a lot of playability in like you can see whoever wears, like you can see a woman or like another person wearing, like, okay, sorry.
Recap.
Yes, recap. Okay, so like with each look, you can see that like whoever wears it, it would fit with their vibes. Like it's not just a man, a woman, or like some other person. It's like a personality. It's not a gender. Like that's what I really like about Telfar. It's it has a story. It's not just clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, like, actually, we did touch on community earlier in the discussion, and actually that was a big theme at Per Gottesson as well at London. And Per also is a queer designer who referenced the work of Joe Orton and his collages as a 60s queer playwright and collagist. He sort of ripped up these library books and created these kind of like anti-authority collages. But Per's expression of community was much more understated and perhaps more in sort of the behind the scenes, and I feel like Telfar does it much more explicitly with the performers, and there's definitely been a kind of there's also a sort of a recurring theme of collaborators that you see again and again through Telfar. You know, I know that Boychild has been a long supporter in working with Telfar Clemens, and as has Juliana Huxtable, who else would I think of? Kelsey Liu, I think, was attending and has sort of participated in these things. I guess who would you like to see Telfar bring in next? Who do you think's interesting that I think could sort of bring an extra new thing to the Telfar world?
I think it's quite interesting because when you compare actually what you just said, the whole community, and I think Solange was also there actually.
Yes.
It's quite interesting when you look at something like Louis Vuitton and you see they obviously also have their community of like mega famous actresses, singers, and this whole, it's basically the same. But I think this is so futuristic of what Telfar does, because this is basically the same without paying millions.
Yeah.
It's kind of, that's why I think we're all pointing at it's so genuine because people actually really want to be a part of it. Yeah. And I'm not saying that for the other one people don't want to, but it's just a matter of money. And I think when it comes to obviously Telfar and the whole vibe and the community, I think it's just, I would like to see exactly what they're doing, just more.
Yeah,
because
no changes
there is
really.
no changing because I think I found through them people I never knew, and I don't know, through Instagram things are possible and everything is just very open and out there, and I think it's nice for me to see they're actually celebrating also so many different creatives that are really not famous, and then some are kind of known. And you know, it's also nice that the known ones we know found a platform in fashion with them. Yeah. Because there is so many people that are like amazing and creative, but in fashion no one cares because they are not selling the bag that they really want to have sold in their next bag campaign. And I think when you look at the whole picture, this is the future. Because we all, as a community, we get bored easily. Things change like in the blink of an eye, and I think this is really also, when I look at the collection, it's kind of what I'm saying is also crazy, but some things are extremely timeless. Things that actually you can have for a long time, like as you said, the track pants or like the track jackets, these things, even though they're like with the logo, they're not screaming autumn winter 20, you know. Sometimes designers nowadays put like the season on it, which I think is always a bit, I'm not so sure if I really want to wear in 4 seasons. Like maybe that's also the problem. Why do I not want to wear it? You know what I mean? But I think that's the problem with it. And I think when I look at the thing, they just need to continue exactly what they do. Bring in their family, their friends, the collaborators. And you know, it's very nice to see that what they do really works. And I'm happy for them that they found like a crazy selling point like the bag, but I agree, I would like people to actually find another thing, maybe a jacket or like pants that actually really expands them to go bigger and bigger, because what they do obviously with the community just also celebrate so many different things. It's not only like celebrating blackness, it's celebrating I'm not black but I feel celebrated. Like it's very, very, very inclusive and like the only thing when it comes to community, I think there could be some more thick people in it, but
Literally was about to say that, girl.
I don't know, there's just, it's nice, but you know, I could never fit the pants, so I would like to see someone who's maybe my size
but
wearing it, but
pushing
exactly the
boundaries.
same pants and not just the oversized hoodie.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. No.
He's pushing boundaries so much, and it's like the one thing that he's lacking is a nice, thick, big person on there, you know what I mean? To like celebrate voluptuous bodies, or, you know, that's the one thing that's missing for me. But I mean, he's doing great in everything else, so it's like a little, you know, nag of one small thing that I would like to see, but because everything else is so great and so perfect. But I think he's just got his finger on the pulse of the underground, and he's really listening to the underground, seeing what's happening in London, in New York, and just around the globe, really, and especially within like queer POC communities. He really, you know, is on it. And it's amazing to see he's bringing people from the underground, platforming them, giving them a spotlight in the open, in Fashion Week, letting them do their thing, bringing them into the family, and really just celebrating that individual for who they are and what they create and what they give out into the world. It's really beautiful. And like, as you were asked before, like if he was ever to do a show in London, I would love for him to like see him collaborate with like groups like Pussy Palace or Babes, you know, and really celebrate what's here in London and really put on a show, because everybody there knows how to party, and so does he by the looks of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think maybe that's what makes him authentic, by choosing his own community as opposed to outsourcing someone or trying to get people to then notice the brand. It has to come from within, and it seems like he is doing that. But I guess it's just, what's he going to do next, you know? Because do these ideas run out, or does it eventually become a little bit predictable? Or I guess, you know.
But when there's always people making new work in the underground, and you're always finding new people coming up, and you know, it keeps it fresh, it keeps it exciting. New technologies are coming out, people are pushing boundaries in that way. You know, we always have things to say.
Yeah, very true.
You know?
I think what's really interesting is actually Telfar has been going since like 2002, so it is a really long time that he's been around in fashion. And like you mentioned earlier, Lewis, the brand won the CFDA Vogue Award in 2017, which obviously gave them a huge sort of like international sort of boost. Obviously, also a financial boost as well. And also when Babak Radboy joined in maybe 2013, I think, as sort of like a creative director. So he was an art director, and he joined because he was like so frustrated that Telfar wasn't getting the acclaim he thought it deserved. And so in that message, we're seeing that, you know, Telfar Clemens has benefited from having someone look out for him and like help him reach a new platform, and that's what he's then passing on. And I think there's another really interesting thing to bring up, is that these things take time to grow. Like you said, Doggy, like there's, you know, fashion's about trends. People move very quickly, people get bored, but actually really great work, really great community, really great thoughtful, you know, future directions come from like they take time. You can't just overnight be a success, and it might feel to many people like Telfar's just sort of appeared on the scene with the bag and, you know, since the CFDA win, but actually he's been doing this for ages.
Yeah.
He was doing unisex clothing before the industry knew it was a thing. And, you know, I think there's definitely a lesson in looking what is he doing now and what's everyone going to get on in 10 years. I actually wanted to ask you guys, there's a quote that Telfar's given a number of times in interviews, and he said he would like to be the next Michael Kors. Okay, so I feel like that's quite controversial. We think Michael Kors is a very, you know, much more establishment brand for the US. You know, it is much more men's and women's wear. You know, it's sort of much more conventional beauty approaches. And obviously Telfar is so kind of completely removed from that, coming up from the underground, redefining gender. You know, the casting is always really interesting and like arresting faces rather than sort of like a typical, you know, Victoria's Secret pretty girl. And I kind of want to know what you thought about how Telfar could grow. Would we want to see him grow in that way? And yeah, what did you think about that?
I think, it's really, as we've been saying all day, it's really authentic and it's going to grow naturally and organically. I don't think it's going to be contrived whatsoever. I think it's going to keep flourishing and keep going. And it's got this really nice feel, this nostalgic feel of like what it must have been back in the 70s and 80s, like with Annie Warhol and the Silver Factory and like the New Romantics in London. It's that kind of really organic thing where they're creating for creating's sake and not to be put on a pedestal or a platform and be like, look what I can do. It's like more of just a celebration of creativity and artistry. Yeah, and I think that's just going to continue.
Yeah, I think, because I suppose as long as they do it authentically, it will still be what we love. And what my sort of terrible fear is that some investment company will come and say, okay, we'll give you this, but you've got to change this, this, this. I don't know if it's going to happen. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's everybody's fear, like every designer's fear, when you're like, if you don't have your own financial stability, then of course you need to have an investor, and like it could change. But then like we know Telfar is so like stubborn in his like way of style, So maybe it won't change anything if he does want to have like a investor.
And grow to that next level.
Yeah, but it's everybody's fear, definitely.
Yeah. Please don't do that.
Wasn't there not mention of like there's a Gap logo on the inside thighs of one of the model's pants?
Oh, right,
There's that potential collaboration and maybe with Gap happening in the future, which kind of is disappointing for me. I don't know about you, because there was that campaign a few years ago about being more normal that Gap was doing, and they lost like a percentage of their sales and everything went down. And as somebody who celebrates individuality and just queerness and everything so beautifully, to work with a company whose slogans like "be more normal."
Maybe he's trying to change it from the inside, like going into the brand and then. Like,
I mean, but there's so many other people that you could collaborate with. Why be somebody who's been,
Maybe this is Telfar's normal. If you see what I mean. So it's like Gap's normal is like, chinos and hoodies, but Telfar's normal is, crazy, denim hot pants and like thigh-high boots. And maybe that's the bit that we want Gap to learn about. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I don't know. I just kind of feel like when there's potential collaborators with other brands who are exciting or other, ventures, there's so many more exciting things than bloody Gap.
But I think it is also being realistic, and I think it would actually really reach a new level of customer. I totally get it, but I think I'm also coming from the side, working also with designers, seeing at shows and presentations and lookbooks. You see what needs to be like going into sale, and you do certain things just for the show. You then produce it differently to sell. I think we also need to, at the end of the day, it's the future right now. 25 years ago, nobody would have seen 2020 coming, like obviously, but I think you know what I mean. And actually from now to, I think there's so much change, but particularly when I look at them, it would make sense for them, I think at one point to, I don't know, take on a sponsorship or whatever investor. But as you said, I totally agree. I think it's so stubborn that I think it would be someone coming in knowing that. I think there would never be like, okay, we do that, and then the next show is like 58 white people in, I don't know, wearing like cotton shirts and like a mini short, and like the bag is made out of cheap leather made by Chinese kids. I think it actually, if this happened, it really would be I think they're very smart. Let's say it like that. Yeah. I think they're very smart, and Clemens is very, very smart, so
he knows his audience.
He knows.
Yeah, we all need to get paid as well, you know what I mean? Like sometimes I collaborate, like do things with brands, and I'm like, there's too much money to say no to, And sometimes you just got to take one for the team, and unfortunately we live in a capitalist society, and we have to survive, and especially as queer people, like it's even more pressure. So yeah, I get it.
I think as long as he stays true and authentic, though, I don't think that it should be the way to go if you decide if it's going to be, what's the word for it, mutually beneficial and financially beneficial. If that's going to maybe taint your direction and your kind of point of view, then I don't think that's necessarily worth it. It's great that he wants to kind of upscale and be as big as like Michael Kors, but as long as he stays true, because then what is Telfar if he doesn't do that? If he doesn't stick with his casting and he doesn't kind of create those unexpected silhouettes, is it really Telfar, you know?
Yeah.
I think with the Michael Kors comment, it's also about, you know, going absolutely global, viral, opening stores. And I'm not really sure if I totally believe still in the walk-in shops and really the experience of going to shop like physically. But I think there's a lot of people actually buying things that they're really not accessible. They live somewhere where, I don't know, you really cannot reach the next big city, or like young queer people, they don't know how to get to New York. Maybe the first store will be New York, what kind of would make sense, but they live somewhere in the middle of America, but online it's so easy to order. So I think when it comes to the Michael Kors thing, it's quite funny because I get it. It makes sense. Obviously everyone wants to grow their business, but I think there was also like a little bit sarcasm in it, obviously, because I think also, let's not forget when Michael just, I don't know, was at Celine, for example. Everyone kind of forgets that little period, but I think what he means is obviously just growing and growing. But as we said, it's organically, and obviously it's really, really, really not trying to chase the money and like, oh, I gotta sell. It's like the design also is just very thoughtful, and you see it's not really about, there's, as you said, we have like one person already here who's like, I'm not so sure if I would buy it, but we like the concept of it, and I think they really want to keep that. And obviously the next Michael Kors would just be like, cut everything off, 55 looks of cocktail dresses.
So maybe his intention is to be controversial, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe it is, the point is that, okay, maybe I wouldn't wear that, but someone else would wear that, you know? And maybe that comes with switching up where he decides to kind of deconstruct it, whether it's the t-shirt or it's the denim that now turns into a massive cutout, or the high leather kind of hot pant.
Yeah, I think to some extent he kind of has achieved his dream in the sense of, like, you know, we talked about the Bushwick Birkin, the shopper bag, and that has become like a really, as you said, an accessible price point for a you know, a designer bag, and that's what the Michael Kors bags were sort of like 5 years ago. Although obviously they kind of had their mass influx, and then sort of everyone's kind of calmed down on them now. But you couldn't go anywhere without seeing a Michael Kors bag on someone's arm. And maybe Telfar is like slowly kind of becoming that, the Michael Kors bag, but for the underground. I also wanted to sort of ask whether you felt like actually, even if Telfar did kind of expand, does actually what we love about Telfar, which is its underground credentials, are those so important that he would lose them if he'd go further, as in staying small and staying slightly on the underground side, that actually gives him a lot of power?
I think, to be honest, when we say like, oh, staying small, I think I'm personally always a fan of going out there and really seeing the bigger picture. And I think when I look at it, they're not small anymore.
Yeah.
Like already they're really getting bigger and bigger, and also the move showing them like coming to Europe. And I think also in Europe, it's just more celebration of being different, I would say, is right now cool. But I think what I would really like to see is actually giving people who are different also behind the scenes a job. And and I think they do exactly that it's really like their community, as we said before. And I think if they grow, the community who would not have a chance maybe without can grow with them. I think this is really a great part of it.
Inside and outside.
Exactly.
Yeah. I guess we should probably start wrapping up, but I think probably my final kind of thing to kind of put out to you is every time Telfar does a show or production, it is a wonderful experience. I haven't yet been able to go to one myself, but I cannot wait till I do. And I wondered, particularly you, Zeinab, actually, as a photographer, like how you would sort of translate or capture those incredible moments for posterity. Is that important for Telfar to keep that spirit and that energy that happens in a place? How could you translate that over time?
I think particularly when I look at his kind of, not only just his shows, but his like lookbooks, I always find that they have a lot of kind of like a life and an energy to them. And I think that's something that's important depending on when you see clothes, regardless of the context that you see them in, you kind of, there needs to always be like an energy and like an aura about a piece, and I think he does that really well. in terms of when I look at his clothes, I think it's something that I would always, some things I'm kind of like leaning towards, and I think that all just is based off whether it would photograph well. So I think that's the way that I see things. But he seems to be, things are hit and miss for me. There are certain things like the kind of like the knitted leather trouser, that's a no-go for me, but it's, who knows? Yeah.
I guess there's so much difference between, like, you know, as a photographer, you're going to be looking at things to shoot and how that works. But perhaps Lewis, as a performer, you know, if you're wearing something, how does that kind of interplay? And how do you think Telfar would kind of segue into your performances?
I mean, in terms of like one for the shows, I feel like we can never really experience the show properly until we're there in the flesh. Because I feel like as a performer, you get, the audience get what you give them in that space, and we're seeing a different view and a different lens of the show through images and stills and clips on social media, and we're not actually in the room to experience the energy of it all, and I think we're missing out on a big part of the whole Telfar experience, you know, and it's something that I want to experience and be immersed in.
Absolutely, and Doggy, you mentioned that, you know, people are getting up and dancing, and I like at Telfar shows, which I absolutely want to do. Yeah, that sounds great.
No, I was actually happy that they were showing in Paris, because that's how I could finally see a show, and it was really well done. The whole, for me, it was that season the best show in Paris, also performance-wise. It was just so extremely, how can I say, in a way, just good. It was just good. It was not like crazy, funky or whatever. It was just incredibly good, well done, professional. And I think to be in this sort of world, also queer, in this community, and like we're all trying to kind of make it, and you know, I think that it was just like, I have crazy respect how good they just did it. And I think the vibe was, I think everyone was just like captivated, like really on spot. You could really not look away from it. You know, sometimes you're on shows and you're like just on the phone. And I think everyone just was like filming the whole thing and really looking at it, because it was just also different for Paris, for stiff Paris. It was really like a shake up, and I think they really wanted it, and they really like they outdone themselves with the performance.
Fabulous.
That's what makes it memorable, isn't it? It's the performative aspect of it that's going to make you remember aspects of the collection.
It's going to stick with you. It's going to be much more emotional.
It makes fashion fun again.
Yeah.
I'm so bored of seeing monotonous like runway shows. Like, I want some theatricality. I want a fucking show. It's a fashion show. You know what I mean?
I think that's a perfect place to leave it. Thank you so much for all of you for coming in, all of your wonderful points. Thank you so much for watching, SHOWstudio viewers. So if you're watching on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe. And for more extensive Fashion Week coverage, be sure to visit showstudio.com. Thank you. Bye.